Imagine waking up tomorrow, turning to the person you've loved and lived with for the last 12 years, checking on your child sleeping in the next room, and suddenly realizing none of it is real.
Right, just completely gone.
Exactly. Like the house, your spouse, your kid, all of it was just this hallucination, a hyper-realistic fantasy your own brain constructed, just to protect your soul, while your physical body endured relentless, agonizing torture in a pitch-black prison.
I mean, it really forces you to consider the sheer processing power of human desperation,
Right,
right?
absolutely.
To simulate a whole decade of linear time, including like the day-to-day minutia of raising a child while your nervous system is actively being dismantled in the real world.
Yeah.
It's just a terrifying testament to what the mind will do to survive.
It really is. And that terrifying testament is actually the foundation of today's deep dive. So welcome. Today we are exploring D.P. Kirk's dark fantasy sci-fi epic, San Vitae, The Awakening.
Such an incredible book.
So good. Specifically, we're going to provide a curated reader's guide and a really close review of Chapter 17, which is called The Pit.
Yeah, that chapter is just phenomenal.
It really is the turning point. And since you're likely already familiar with Kirk's brutal universe, I mean, you probably already know about the feral power of the San Vitae and the zealous crusade of the New Covenant. We are just going to skip the primer today.
Yeah, let's just get right into it.
Right. We're dropping straight into the ruins of Rwanthi to examine, honestly, what I consider a masterclass in how physical action can serve as a mirror for deep psychological trauma.
I completely agree.
Right.
And, to fully grasp the impact of the pit, we really have to trace the narrative through line of trauma as a weapon.
Because it's everywhere in this book.
It is. This entire chapter is anchored by the psychological baggage that our protagonist, Kurien, and his blood-bonded companion, Sharina, carry into the chasm.
Right.
During those 12 years in the Inquisitor's vault, Kurien's mind built that idyllic illusion with his former Covenness Myasuchi and their imaginary son, Han.
See, I struggle to see how an imaginary family acts as a functional shield, though.
How so?
Well, wouldn't waking up in a dark vault and realizing Myasuchi and Han were just, like, coping mechanisms, wouldn't that completely shatter his mind?
Yeah, you would think so.
I mean, how is he even remotely functional enough to traverse the wasteland, let alone actually fight alongside Sharina?
Well, that is really where Kirk's psychological world building shines. Because the realization did shatter him,
Okay.
but not into dust, if that makes sense. It fractured him into distinct pieces.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because the human mind can only take so much pain before it adapts by compartmentalizing, right? So to protect the core of his humanity, the part that actually loved Myasuchi and grieved for Han, his psyche birthed what the narrative calls a demon aspect.
Right, the demon aspect, which isn't like a literal monster.
Exactly, no. It's not a literal demon from some hell dimension.
Yeah.
It is a merciless, survival-driven persona that was forged entirely from pain and rage. It took the brunt of the torture, so the softer parts of Kurien could remain hidden in that hallucination.
So it's almost like a cauterized wound.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like the initial burn of the trauma stops you from bleeding out in the vault, but it leaves behind this dead, unfeeling scar tissue.
Yes.
And that scar tissue is the demon aspect, which now entirely dictates his survival instincts.
That captures the mechanism perfectly, yeah. The scar tissue is completely desensitized to horror.
Which is pretty handy in a post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Right. It makes it highly effective for surviving out there, but terribly dangerous to anyone around him. And the thing is, the New Covenant Inquisitors knew exactly what they were doing.
They weren't just being sadistic.
No, they weren't torturing him for a decade out of simple cruelty. They were deliberately applying pressure to that psychological fracture to study the resulting mutation.
Which leads us to the Sanites.
Exactly. Kurien and Sharina represent this very rare evolved state known as the Sanites.
And this internal fracturing directly dictates how they handle external threats.
Right. Oh, 100%.
That becomes incredibly apparent when we look at the physical combat in Chapter 17. So they descend into this chasm beneath the ruined city, and they're immediately ambushed by mindless, undead drones.
Yeah, the husks.
Right, controlled by a puppeteer. And Kirk could have easily just written a standard hack-and-slash scene here, just sword swinging and blood.
Right, a typical fantasy battle.
But the mechanics of the fight are deliberately designed to reflect their internal state.
It's so brilliant. Notice the contrast in how the two sides actually operate during that ambush.
The puppeteer versus our heroes.
Yeah. The puppeteer uses husks, which are bodies completely stripped of will and emotion. They rely on sheer numbers and cold
Yeah,
orchestration.
very mechanical.
But Kurien and Sharina, they're utilizing a magic system that requires profound emotional volatility. The vitae they wield isn't just a physical resource you pull from like a mana pool in a video game.
It's not just a battery you recharge.
Exactly. It requires psychological kindling.
I really want to break down how that Vitae actually interfaces with the physical world during this ambush because the choreography here is just stunning.
It's so
It
cinematic.
really is. So Sharina manifests a defensive shield that looks like alabaster veins running through black marble.
Such a cool visual.
And then when Kurien goes on the offensive, he doesn't just punch these drones, he literally grabs them, hauls them physically through Sharina's shield, and lets the razor-sharp vitae veins shred the undead flesh.
It's brutal.
But wait, how does that physical interaction actually work on a molecular level? Because why doesn't he lose his own arms?
Right, that's the genius of it. So vitae in this evolved sanite state acts almost like a highly pressurized non-Newtonian fluid.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so when it's at rest or merely defensive, it holds a rigid structure, like that marble Kirk describes. But when kinetic energy is applied like Kurien violently pulling a drone through it, the VK reacts.
By fighting back.
Exactly. It sharpens its edges at the point of impact, vibrating at a frequency that actually severs molecular bonds.
That is insane. So
Well-
it's tearing the drones apart at the structural level.
Precisely. But more importantly, to your question about his arms, Kurien being able to reach through Sharina's shield without it shredding him requires absolute subconscious trust.
Oh, because of the blood bond?
Yes. The Vitae recognizes his biometric signature.
Man, that mechanical detail makes the quiet moment following the fight so much heavier.
It really does.
Because the puppeteer retreats, the adrenaline crashes, and they are just left standing there in the freezing dark of the pit.
Such a stark transition.
And this is where Sharina confronts Kurien about his demon aspect, because earlier, during their escape from the vault, that demon aspect actually took the wheel, right?
It did, yeah.
And it forced Sharina to look into Kurien's eyes while she was dying, which just seems so cruel.
Well, it was a test by the demon. The survival persona wanted to assert dominance.
Like trying to scare her away?
Kind of. It wanted to show Sharina the monster Kurien had become, essentially daring her to reject him. But in the quiet of the chasm, Sharina reveals the truth of that moment.
Which is just heartbreaking.
It is. She tells him she didn't see demonic pride or malice in his reflection.
Right.
She saw the absolute crushing sadness of his hollowness. She looked past all that cauterized scar tissue we talked about, and she saw the broken father mourning a son who never existed.
Wow. See, what's so compelling about Kirk's writing here is that every single drop of blood spilled is tied to this kind of agonizing emotional intimacy.
It's never just action for action's sake.
Exactly. The magic system demands connection. They aren't just fighting monsters in the dark. They are desperately fighting to recognize the humanity in each other, especially when their own minds are telling them they're just weapons.
And that vulnerability is really the true core of the chapter. And the narrative pacing is just relentless here.
Oh, it doesn't give you a second to breathe.
Because the exact moment they achieve that profound emotional clarity, the external world attempts to literally obliterate them.
The airship.
Right. The Covenant forces above the chasm locate them, and a high-tech airship fires a missile directly into their trench.
The juxtaposition there is brilliant. You have this intimate, fragile human connection happening in the dirt, and it's interrupted by the absolute pinnacle of sterilized, cold military technology.
Yeah, magic versus machine.
And they have a fraction of a second to react. There's no time to run, no time to formulate a tactical plan. They fully expect this missile to vaporize them.
And their reaction isn't to lash out.
No, they
Yeah.
just embrace. They just hold on to each other.
But that profound fear, and it's not just the fear of personal death, but the terror of losing the only other person who actually understands your shattered soul that acts as a catalyst.
It triggers the evolution.
Exactly. It triggers a biological and metaphysical evolution. In that split second, their consciousness merges.
I love the description here.
It's amazing. A unified voice echoes in their mind, described as simultaneously demonic and feminine, and it just says, it's our turn.
Literal chills. Let's analyze the mechanics of what happens next, though, because this is where the lore of the Sanites is completely redefined for the reader.
Yeah, this changes everything.
Kurien's body instinctively generates a vitae barrier so massive and dense that it completely absorbs the thermal and kinetic shock wave of a military-grade missile.
Which should be impossible.
Right. How is that physically possible without burning through his own life force and just turning to ash on the spot?
So this is the fundamental difference between standard San Vitae and the evolved Sanite. Normal San Vitae operate on a closed thermodynamic system,
Okay, meaning what?
meaning to manifest magic, they have to burn their own cellular energy.
Oh, so it's a ticking clock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The more they use, the faster their bodies deteriorate, which inevitably leads to total madness as the demon aspect takes over just to prevent physical death.
Yikes. So they literally eat themselves alive to use magic.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
But in that moment of absolute terror and complete empathy, Kurien and Sharina's bond shifts their biology into an open system.
Wait, an open system?
Yeah. Sanites possess the terrifying ability to draw ambient energy from their environment to fuel their manifestations.
Oh, wow. So instead of cannibalizing their own cells, they are acting as a conduit.
Precisely.
They're pulling thermal, kinetic, or even latent organic energy from the chasm around them to build that massive shield.
They weaponize the environment itself. And this is exactly why the Covenant Inquisitors were studying Kurien.
Because if they can figure that out...
Right, if a Sanite learns to consciously control this environmental absorption, they bypass the ticking clock of deterioration. They could theoretically scale their power infinitely.
Which is terrifying for the Covenant.
It is. They're limited only by the energy available in their surroundings.
Yeah.
This puts them on par with the Antiphidi.
The godlike beings who arrived during the cataclysm.
Yes, the ones who originally shaped this entire world order.
The irony of the Covenant's crusade is just staggering when you look at it through this mechanical lens.
Oh, it really is.
I mean, the Covenant believes they are hunting mindless feral monsters. They preach this rigid doctrine of purity and emotional suppression.
They hate anything messy or emotional.
Right. Yet the ultimate godlike power of a Sanite isn't unlocked by monstrous bloodlust at all.
No, not at all.
It is unlocked by profound empathy. It requires shared vulnerability, trust, and the sheer terror of losing someone you love.
It completely upends the moral hierarchy the Covenant uses to justify their atrocities. The magic system is inextricably linked to the character's emotional depth.
It's beautiful, honestly.
It really is. Their greatest destructive power is birthed directly from their capacity to love.
But in Kirk's world, surviving the missile strike comes with a massive physiological hangover.
Oh, a huge one.
Because the physics of an open system might save their lives in the moment, but channeling that much energy through a moral nervous system takes a severe toll.
Yeah, the human body isn't built to be a lightning rod for a missile explosion.
The immediate aftermath in the ruins really highlights the brutal tightrope they're walking.
Well, because the environmental energy builds the shield, right? But their bodies still require raw, organic vitae to stabilize their own collapsing cellular structure after acting as a conduit of that magnitude.
So they're basically starving.
Extremely. As they hide in the rubble, sweating and exhausted, the threat of the demon aspect is just suffocating.
Just it wants to feed.
Exactly. If they don't replenish their biological baseline, the darker madness will hijack their nervous system just to keep the organs functioning.
It's a constant state of paranoia. They wield the power of gods, literally, but they are always one missed meal away from devolving into the very feral beasts the Covenant accuses them of being.
Such a precarious balance.
And yet, amidst the smoke and the rubble, Kirk gives us this incredibly tender, grounding detail.
The humming.
Yes. Sharina's demon is starting to claw its way to the surface because she is starving for Vitae. She is physically trembling, losing her grip on her own mind.
She's about to turn.
And Kurien, who is holding her tight against his chest, just begins humming a haunting foreign melody to soothe her.
It acts as an auditory anchor.
Yeah.
The melody reminds her of a world outside of the pit, a world before the torture.
It's so cinematic.
You have this gritty, relentless survival horror aesthetic. You know, the pulverized concrete, the shredded undead, the echo of the missile strike. And squarely in the center of it is a man using a lullaby to keep the woman he's bonded with from losing her soul.
It just perfectly grounds the massive scale of the magic back into their raw humanity. But of course, Kirk doesn't let you linger in the romance for too long, because the chapter ends on a phenomenal plot hook.
Oh, it expands the scope of the entire novel.
As they catch their breath, they peek through the debris and observe the Covenant forces repelling into the chasm.
And you really have to pay close attention to the logistics of the Covenant's movement here.
Right, what are they actually doing?
Well, they aren't sweeping the rubble for Kurien and Sharina's bodies. They are ignoring the blast zone entirely.
Wait, Really?
Yeah, they're hauling heavy Davide gear deep into the lowest levels of the pit.
Meaning the missile strike was never actually about them.
No.
They were just acceptable collateral damage in the way of a much larger objective.
Exactly. The Covenant is securing the perimeter for something ancient. They are searching for torpor chambers hidden beneath the city.
And those chambers supposedly contain the slumbering Anti-Vitae, right?
Yes, the gods themselves.
I really want to touch on how that Davide technology actually works conceptually, because bringing it into the pit changes the stakes entirely for Kurien and Sharina.
It's their kryptonite.
Right. If Sanite magic is an open system pulling energy from the environment, how does the Covenant's gear actually suppress it?
So Davide Tech creates localized dampening fields that disrupt the resonant frequency of Vitae.
Okay, so like a jammer.
Yeah, think of it like noise-canceling headphones, but for kinetic and thermal energy.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
It projects an inverse waveform that stabilizes the environment, which effectively cuts off the open system. It forces a sanite back into a closed loop.
Oh, no.
Yeah. If Kurien tries to pull ambient energy while inside a Davide field, he gets absolutely nothing, and his body is forced to burn its own cells again.
That's horrifying.
And the Covenant is dragging this gear down there, not to fight Kurien, but to ensure that if they wake an Anti-Vitae, they can keep it in a closed loop and control it.
Wow. It just blows the geopolitical scope of the story wide open. You transition seamlessly from this intimate, visceral fight for survival in a dirty trench to the realization that the fate of the entire world is literally sleeping in a chamber a few hundred yards beneath them.
It really is a masterclass in narrative pacing. Kirk answers the immediate pressing questions of survival while simultaneously posing massive new philosophical and logistical threats to pull you forward.
Totally. So to sort of synthesize this review for you, San Vitae, The Awakening is an absolute triumph of the genre.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, if you appreciate dark fantasy that treats its magic systems like a hard science with severe biological and psychological consequences, this is required reading.
Absolutely.
Chapter 17 perfectly showcases how Kirk balances a dark, gritty aesthetic with a profoundly touching exploration of what it actually takes to rebuild a shattered psyche.
Because the narrative deeply respects the weight of its own trauma.
It doesn't cheapen it.
No, it doesn't offer the characters a clean resolution or an easy path to healing. Kurien and Sharina's bond is messy. It is born of mutual suffering. But it is fundamentally beautiful because it is forged through empathy in a wasteland completely devoid of it.
The pit serves as the perfect microcosm of the novel. It highlights the brutal combat, the looming threat of the New Covenant, and most importantly, the unbreakable bond between two people using their shared trauma as a weapon to keep each other human. We highly encourage you to dive into the rest of the book yourself.
Yes, definitely.
Examine the world building, dissect the thermodynamics of the magic, and really invest yourself in these intricate character dynamics.
And as you explore the rest of Kirk's universe, I want to leave you with a lingering question to ponder.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We have established that Kurien's immense sanite power and his incredible survival instincts are entirely fueled by the trauma of his lost 12 years and the demon aspect it created.
Right, the scar tissue.
Exactly. So if he ever truly heals, forgives himself, and finds real peace with Myasuchi's memory, would he lose the very power that keeps him alive in this ruthless wasteland?
Wow.
Can you ever really afford to be completely whole in a broken world?
That is a phenomenal question to end on. If you heal the wound, you lose the armor.
Exactly.
Something to think about as you read. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.